Have you ever watched the sequel to a movie or read a book that just completely felt like a cash grab? Even if that wasn't their intention, it completely pulls you out of the moment and ruins the story. And in the worst cases, it ruins the original too. How can you avoid this with your stories? The best sequels or prequels will enrich and add depth to the world where the first one takes place in and gives you even more of a reason to be a fan. They should stand on their own and they should have purpose. That's how you avoid second book syndrome in a series. Now, your sequel will most likely build up on what was in the first, but you want it to not rest on the laurels of the work that came before it. It has to be good on its own and it has to have its own merit. There are two kinds of sequels. You have direct sequels and indirect sequels. If it continues a single story, it is a direct sequel. You'll know because, like I said, it'll be the same story. It'll use the same characters. It'll be the same everything. If it jumps to a new era or uses new characters, then it is an indirect sequel. An example of this would be Naruto Shippuden. That's a direct sequel. Boruto's kind of on the fence. You could argue Boruto's a direct sequel. You could argue it's indirect, though. Everything's very different in this. Something that's definitely indirect sequels, though, is stuff like Final Fantasy, where, some of them will have a direct sequel, but most of the major numbered entries, unless they say part 1, 2, or 3, are their own thing in a new world or a new dimension. Any sequels and prequels should be planned at the start when you're actually working on the original. Even if it's just a vague idea in the back of your head, you just want to be kind of aware of it, because now as you're making the first, you actually have ways to set up what's to come or ways to hook into the original so it's more coherent and satisfying. Something the newer writers struggle with is in your sequels, you're going to want to reintroduce your characters and tell your reader what they look like again. There's no telling if this is somebody's first book, as in a reader's first book in your series, and they're just happen to be starting at 2 or 3. And if somebody did start at 1, there's no telling if it's been 6 months since they actually read the original. So they'll need a refresher too. You're also going to want to keep giving you're going to want to keep giving your characters character moments, right? You're going to want to display who they are, what they're like, who they've become, how they've changed, that sort of thing, right? Treat them like they're still a person and they are still going through their journey. The best sequels take what worked in the first and ramp it up. Alien, the movie, versus Aliens. There's a lot of debate as to which one's better. A lot of people think that Aliens is better. They took the alien, they built it up, they put a bunch of them in there, they worked on the hive dynamics with them, and they went more in depth into Weyland-Yutani, the company, and how it works, what they do. Something to be cautious about, though, is Alien, the first movie, I would argue, was decisively a horror type of thing. It was a sci-fi, like, from a point of view of the way it was skinned, but it's definitely a horror movie that takes place in space. The sequel, Aliens, was more of a survival horror / thriller / action at times. That can be a little bit of a risky shift when you're shifting tone. It's not necessarily risky, though. You got to feel it out, see what works, let the story be what it's going to be, of course. And then there's things like Terminator versus Terminator 2. They put in more Terminators. They ramp up how cool the fights are and all that. Um, the survival dynamics. They take the Terminator, the original one that was played by Arnold, and they put some humanity into it, even though it's a machine and it's not literally having humanity. They give it a lot of character moments, build it up, and they actually make you connected to this machine designed to kill people. That helps them explore new and different themes. They go over certain aspects of trauma that were caused by the first movie, and they really develop the world and make it feel real. Um, that's a thing for when you're plotting, is the classic this thing happens, therefore this thing happens, right? Terminator 1 happens, therefore this person is, everybody thinks they're crazy. This person is like a struggling youth because their childhood is framed through a lens of you have to be the savior of humanity, and I'm going to make you a soldier. He doesn't know it's real. He thinks that the person's crazy. Their whole lives unravel because of the first, and this is kind of the story of how that develops and changes. And then there is Resident Evil 1 versus Resident Evil 2. The first one takes place in a mansion where there are some zombies. The second one takes place, it brings the zombies to the city, and it's a full-blown apocalypse now, and it seems like everything is ruined. There's so many of them. There's a lot more than there are in the first one. When they go into the underground labs, they're a lot more expansive. You really get to see the fallout. They ramp up everything that worked about the first one and deliver it in a more intense package. They even play around with the game mechanics because there are, if you haven't played any of the original Resident Evils, you walk up to a closed door and then you have a little cutscene where the door opens, you watch it in first person, and then you walk through. Those doors are always safe until the second Resident Evil happened, where you walk into a room, the door opens, and bam, a zombie attacks you, and it's like a POV thing of it coming at you. Now you got to do this fight you didn't expect in a scenario where you thought you were safe. So everything it does, it builds up on the first. It does more of what the first did well, and it capitalizes on some missed opportunities that the first presented that they weren't even aware of at the time when they were originally doing it. I'll give one more example of sequels, but then I want to get into prequels. Both are very important. Is Silent Hill 1 versus Silent Hill 2, right? The first one is a good horror game on its own, stands on its own 2 feet, but the second one goes a lot more in depth into the actual psychological horror aspect of it. 2 is where they really demonstrate that everything in the town is a reflection of your psyche, and not everybody is seeing what you're seeing. They're not explicit about it in this one yet. That's for a later sequel. But in 2, there are definitely hints and things that tell you that it may be the case. Another thing, Silent Hill still keeps secrets from you, right? It hints at things, but it lets you unravel it yourself, and it doesn't spoon feed you and treat you like you're just, mindless. It lets you think and reflect on it and experience the story to whatever degree you want, because it also presents the opportunity to just mindlessly enjoy it, have a good time after you got back home from a 14-hour shift. But back to those psychological horror elements, it really makes every single monster there a deeper reflection of what is in the POV character's mind, and it really, really develops the world. Now, with prequels, you want it to be a defining event in your world or something that was a defining event for your character. Just like a sequel, it should stand on its own 2 feet. The thing about a prequel is there are people that are going to read or watch in chronological order, and that means that this is the new number one in your series, and this is going to be the first they see of it. So it actually has to be good. It has to be an introductory spot, but it builds up on the first and it informs the first. If somebody reads it after your main series, for example, they should be like, wow, I get it now. I see, I understand now. The Conjuring series, the first one, the first entry, is widely considered one of the greatest horror movies of all time. But it's had good prequels and sequels, and it's had pretty lackluster prequels and sequels. There have also been some that really stand out as great in that world, and I want to go over what makes them so good. Annabelle is a movie that a lot of people would put somewhere between okay and meh, but Annabelle Creation is considered to be one of the best prequels slash horror movies of all time, at least from what I'm seeing. It wasn't necessarily for me. I liked Annabelle Comes Home a lot more, and The Nun is also another top of the line S tier movies, and it is also a prequel of The Conjuring. What these movies have in common is that they all have good characters and good stories that stand on their own, and they don't rely on the existence of the original work to actually be enjoyable. They are incredible standalone stories someone can enjoy. They don't rest on the laurels of anything. The writers really came with the best that they could, and that's exactly what you need to do if you want your prequels to actually be something that people are happy to partake in. Now, these movies keep the same quality and atmosphere from the original work, or they ramp it up, and like I mentioned before, all of them are defining moments in their world. Whether direct or indirect, all of these movies have big ramifications for the things that happen next chronologically in the world, and it matters a lot to the main characters of the original work, whether they realize it at the time or not. The Yakuza series also has potentially the best prequel in video game history. It's so good that I'd recommend if somebody's going to start that series, they begin with the prequel 0 instead of going to number 1. In 1, the main character is a 37-year-old Yakuza member, but in 0, it brings it back to when he was 18, and it shows an incredibly pivotal moment for that city, that world, and at least through the lens of which we view it, and the main character and everybody around him. It also shows the bond between Kiryu and his brother Nishiki, and that's really important because Kiryu making a big sacrifice for his brother Nishiki right at the start of 1 is what fuels the whole entire plot type of thing. So it elevates the original in every single way, right? Like when you see the first one and you see Kiryu make that sacrifice, you're like, yeah, it makes sense that somebody would do that for their brother. But if you play 0 first and you have that reframe, you're like, wow, this is a major thing, and it makes a lot of sense as to why he would do that. This is a much bigger emotional event now for a player than if they were to have started with 1. Yakuza 0 also shows how Goro Majima went from a well-respected businessman to an absolute manic sociopath. And his arc is probably one of the best in all of fiction. The whole thing enhances and elevates the original to new heights that it couldn't have possibly reached without that prequel. And like I said, it is now chronologically the first. So it has to really be a good jumping off point for your story. You're going to want to make it so that it hooks your audience and keeps them craving more so that they actually go through with the rest of the series and they actually read or watch the original. As always, make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know what to cover next. If you've got any questions, I'm willing to answer those down there. And if it's not something I can answer with a quick reply, I'll make a video about it too.